started on this compensation thing, Brian and I had to pick salaries for ourselves, something more than zero. And so we picked $5,000 a month, right? It's like, okay, well, it's a number. Obviously below market value, we'd been out in the market for a while and had worked in our lives. So when we hired employee number 3, we had to decide what we were going to pay them, $5,000. Hired employee number 4, $5,000. And so we just built like, okay, if you're here for the salary, you're here for the wrong reason, right? That's not why you're going to join this motley crew of folks. And that lasted for like a while. It's like and then it kind of has this inertia built in where it's like, okay, well, all of us sitting in the room chatting with you that we're trying to get you to join the company are all paying each other. Paying ourselves $5,000 a month. Now, what do you think you should be able to get when all of us are making $5,000? Of course, that doesn't last forever, and you have to.
What was the pitch at that time? So it's not like, no offense to HubSpot, but it's not the sexiest idea. You're not saying we're building the electric car here. Like you didn't have that going for you. You might have had your own magnetism, which is like for me, I get this cheat code because like this guy, he listens to the podcast, and this happens. This podcast is a great talent pipeline for us because people will listen to it, and over time they decide for themselves. Either I think this guy's a dummy and he annoys me, or I think this guy's smart and I really like. I'd love to hang out with these guys. I think I could learn a bunch from them, and so it becomes an unfair advantage. But you didn't have that back in the day. So how did you convince people to do this $5,000 Lego block of salary building?
Yeah. So we cheated a little bit, right? Because of the first 8 people in the company, 7 of them came out of MIT Sloan, the same school that Brian and I went to, and we met in class. So it was kind of in network kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, it's just a bunch of friends that sort of know each other in network or whatever. Let's go do this thing, right? And it's also, and they were kind of far enough along in their careers that they were not missing meals or anything like that, right? They had just gone to business school, a relatively good business school, and so that was it. It's like, and then the other thing, and this is the part. There's equity, but there's also the this is not that risky, dude. Like, let's say this doesn't work out and we end up being chumps with the idea is really bad 3-6 months from now, you will basically be able to pick up where you left off, right? There's no loss other than the opportunity cost of those 3 to 6 months. This is not like a irreversible lifetime decision that I've made this call and that's all I'm going to have to be able to do for the next 5 or 10 years. And that was enough. It's
Well, did things change? How many people do you think at HubSpot have made like 8 figures because of their equity? And once you worked with those people for a long time and you're like, oh shit, like the company went public and like, you don't need to work anymore, which, and does that change the dynamic?
It hasn't. So to answer your question, so I always have to, there's this little, it only takes like a second and a half for me to translate 8 figures into what is that actually? So that's 10 million plus.
Yeah, like maybe 5 or 10 million is like the number where you're like, fuck this, I don't need this job.
Probably somewhere in the 20 to 30 range, if I had to guess, of people that have made that much, over 50, maybe even 100, like millionaires in the 7-figure range. But even when that was happening, right? Like, well, a couple of things. One is it distorts it a little bit because as a private company, even though the valuation from the last round or whatever is X, the shares are not liquid, right? So they're worth it, but they're worth it on paper. They can't go out and actually sell their shares. So that's kind of thing number one. And so it doesn't, even if they wanted to, it can't really change behavior. You can't go off and buy something with your shares. So that's thing number one. But thing number two, it's that we did have like this kind of esprit de corps, right? It wasn't really about the money. It was about winning. It was about kind of building something together. And I like to believe that it wasn't even really the idea that if we had taken that same early group of 20, 25 people and parachuted them into some other company, into some other industry, there's still software and SaaS, that we would have likely done reasonably well as well. I think it came down to the people had good chemistry. They were focused on the right thing. I think our early hiring policy was to hire kind of smart people that get shit done. That was kind of the thing, right? We want people that have what we called high wattage. They were like measurably smart. If you had to have them take an IQ test, we didn't do that, but measurably smart. But there's lots of very, very smart people in the world, but they have this kind of predilection to action. Like they could not help but like if they found a problem, they're going to go try and solve it. They're going to jump in, feet first, and they're just going to do it, or head first, whatever the phrase is. And that was enough. So we made a deliberate decision not to hire what we call press release hires. Press release hires when you hire someone and then you feel compelled to issue a press release, say, oh, HubSpot just hired the VP of sales from such and such company, whatever that is, a 30-year background in doing X. If we felt like we ever hired someone that was worthy of a press release, we did it wrong. right? That's not the kind of person we were looking for, because they may have done amazing things at Google, Microsoft, Facebook, pick your company of choice, but the startup is such a different context, and you're paying for these kind of specialized set of skills that may or may not be relevant. Arbitrage is really, really hard. So we're bigger on the identify diamonds in the rough, people that are going to be big. It's like you're buying a stock early versus going after the folks that already were press release worthy. So yeah.
I think that's been my skill. Sean, you've kind of seen my journey. I think my skill has been finding the diamonds in the rough. So we've had Sean and I kind of discovered one another. But then there's Steph Smith, who's now at A16Z. Yep. We had Trung, who's popular. We've had a bunch of people who went on and founded different companies. And what I've always looked for, I purposely have looked for these diamond in the roughs, because I was like, I can't afford, to pay X, Y, and Z. So I got to hire this 24-year-old who I know will be a boss in 5 or 10 years.
By the way, Sam, it's not just that you can't afford them. I remember once the hustle got to the point where you could afford them, you were just kind of disgusted by the concept of somebody making that much money. I remember you were just like, how much does this kid over here work, this engineer at my office? And I'd be like, I don't know, whatever. He's 150, 170. You're like, 170? Oh my God. this is, if this person left, would the company fail? No, not at all.
Well,
this is crazy.
That was 10 years, or that was a few years ago. So
yeah.
So things have changed a little bit. But also your people would show up to work at noon. And I'd be like, what the hell, man? This guy just waltzed in and and he's he arrived right when they're serving lunch. But we've discovered some cool people, and I always look for a couple things. The first thing is, actually, this is from Paul Graham. He goes, I look to hire animals, people who you're a little bit afraid of, and they're just freaks where they work a lot. I also look for people who are weird. So I always want weird people who have fairly extreme opinions. Even if I totally disagree with their opinions, I really like that someone's well thought, well researched, and has a strong opinion on something. But I love weirdos and eccentric people. And I have found that if you can, at our startup at the Hustle, we did a really good job of accepting weirdos and letting them be odd. And we embraced it. And I always found that to be kind of we used to say, let your freak flag, freak flag fly. And we're I was we had all types of different people. We had just every type of person we worked at our company, and they liked that we embraced their kind of them being different.
Yeah, we have something. So we have 5 kind of core values as part of our HubSpot culture. One of them is remarkability, or being remarkable. And what we mean by that is there's something noteworthy they've done in their past, or there's something quirky, something different, something that's an outlier about them. And it doesn't have to be specifically business or whatever even role that they're in, but they're just kind of off the kind of main beat. And that we've done well with those kinds of people. We give them a home, kind of let them do their thing, and it tends to work out. Yeah.
So Sam had weirdos and kind of let your freak flag fly. You have the remarkability. Have you done something remarkable? We had one at Bebo that was the same as we used to say we hired degenerates. It's intentionally a word that's usually negative, right? We hired degenerates. And what we'd always ask, me and Furkan, we noticed this in each other. We were like, dude, we've gone through these phases in our lives where we just got really obsessed with something that didn't have a clear payoff. It wasn't the popular thing to be obsessed with. It wasn't the cookie cutter good thing to be obsessed with. It wasn't grades in school. It would be Furkan got really into, this video game, and he was became a top 100 ranked player of this game. And it was a total, in one hand, I knew it was a waste of time, but I couldn't help it. I just loved it, and I obsessed with it. I became the best at it, and I just wanted to win so badly. And at some point I even stopped being about winning. It was just I wanted to get to the next level and keep going. And I had done the same thing with poker. He had done it with poker also. So we kind of identified these. It's hey, do you go through these periods of 3 years of deep obsession around some competitive thing? And then when you do you really try to study the game and figure out how to what are the loopholes in the game? What are the rules of the game? You immerse yourself with other players in the game, because cool. Our game now is just startups, and we would try to find people who had some evidence of degeneracy. It's you come in at noon because you stay up till 4 a.m, building that SoundCloud player that works like TikTok for no reason because you're so annoyed that SoundCloud is too slow in the way that they develop things. It's other people would look at that as oh, you're not really reliable or very structured, or why did you work on that? That wasn't even the task at hand. Whereas
Yeah.
we would see that and we'd be like, oh, all we need to do is just point this guy's degeneracy at the right direction and then we'll win. And that was like our mindset.
I think of that as a kind of borderline pathological obsession. Like that's like once you attach yourself, whatever it happens to be, right? And what our job is to kind of bring it just shy of pathological, where it's like kind of harming themselves. But it's like you can't help yourself. You're gonna like just dig in, and whether it's video games or whatever it happens to be, people that have, I don't call it a gene, but that have that trait, tend to work out well in startups because you're trying to attach yourself to a particular thing, a particular problem. The other thing, I'm just as aware, since we're on the topic of talent, I've got this little mini framework, works at multiple levels of abstraction. They're like three kind of vectors of kind of measurement of people. One is that you have the creatives, and these are people that start things. They have ideas. They have 180-mile, ideas an hour kind of thing if you sit down in a room with them. Then there are they're the starters. Then you have the completers. Those are the people that can make a list of like, here are the things that need to get done in order for us to ship a product or do whatever. And often those folks are at odds. Like the idea folks are kind of really frustrated with the completers that are just like, I'm just trying to check a box and make our, it's like, yes, but I'm doing this thing and it's not good enough yet. You have that tension. And that's what brings in the third person, which is the collaborator. And the collaborator is really good at communicating, is really good at bridging gaps across departments, across individual people, and kind of pulling it all together. And usually you're looking for someone that has at least some, like a 9 or a 10 on one of those dimensions, a 7 or an 8 on another one, and usually very low on the third, right? It's like you can have the
What are you?
Super creative. I'm on the creative side.